Hey guys, Terry here. Today I'm going to see if I remember how to quilt. I'm going to make a t-shirt quilt for a Christmas present, and I think I have all of my supplies here. I'm going to make it out of 12 t-shirts. I've bought the fusible lightweight interfacing that you iron onto the t-shirts. So I've got that. I've got my cutting mat. I've got my tools, scissors and cutter, ruler. The colors of my t-shirts were mostly gray and black and white. I tried to pick topics in the fabrics that were near to my son's heart, so he's into, I've got this fabric. I can't believe I found fabric that had bourbon and whiskey and drinks on it, so I thought that was really cute. I'm going to put a red border on it, and then the background is going to be soccer balls. So I thought that went with a lot of his t-shirts from his soccer days. So it's various t-shirts from him growing up. He thinks he donated these. I pulled these out of the donate bag, so he doesn't know we've kept these over the years. So I think it's going to be cute. I've also got the batting for the fabric. So I've got 12 t-shirts. I'm going to try to arrange them 3 across and 4 down. I think this will make a good lap size. I need to see how big the t-shirts are. In other words, when I go to cut these, I need to figure out, I'm going to start with the largest t-shirt and figure out that size, and then cut them into squares, and then put the fusible backing on. And then once I get them all stitched together, I'm going to put the drink fabric as the border, the outside border. So I bought, I think I bought 4 yards of the fusible interfacing to cover all the t-shirts. And then I bought a yard of the border, the drink fabric. I bought half a yard of red for the binding. And then I bought 4 yards for the soccer ball backing. Like I said, the t-shirts were mostly gray and white and black, so when I went to pick out the fabric, I was thinking about what colors would go with the colors of t-shirts. I've seen patterns where they put fabric in between the t-shirts. I bought enough red. It called for half a yard of the binding. So I bought a yard of it in case I did want to make some strips to put between the t-shirts on there. But I'm just going to have to lay the t-shirts out and see if I want to put a border between them or not. So I think I'm ready to go with all my supplies. So I think what I'm going to do is take photographs along the way, and then I'll come back on the video and show you the final product. Thanks, guys. Okay, so here's some things to keep in mind when you're cutting the t-shirts. Know what size your biggest shirt is. So for me it was 13 inches. So I'm cutting them 14 to 14 and a half inch squares. The other thing you want to keep in mind is typically the image is close to the collar. So you're going to cut the top off, and then you're going to measure your distance down here, because you're going to have to keep, even if your t-shirt just says something up here, remember you got to make a square, so you're cutting it down here. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of lining up my ruler for the first cut under the collar. I know I want to get as close to the collar as possible, and I know I want it to be a straight edge here. So I'm looking at the words here that they ironed on, and I'm just making sure my ruler is lined up with that. Okay, so this is my first cut. It's dependent on this collar. So I'm going across there. That's good. And now I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to line it up on my mat just so it's straight across the top there. Lining it up. I'm careful not to be stretching it. T-shirts are stretchy. And then I'm taking my ruler, and knowing that I want it to be 14 inches, I'm kind of taking it across my image and seeing what, I want to leave equal distance here and here. So some of it is eyeballing it. And depending on what's on your t-shirt, sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. So this one's looking like, if I do 3 inches here, 3 inches on that side, that looks pretty even. So I'm just going to make a tick mark here so that I know where the 14 is. And you can do a little bit bigger than that, because remember we're going to put the fusing on. And then we'll trim it up even more. So this is just kind of getting it into a format we can work with. So next I'm putting my ruler on, and knowing I want to cut here, I want to cut even with that top line that I just did. So if you can see that black line, I'm going to line that black line up with the top of the t-shirt. And then I'm going to bring my edge over to where I made my 14-inch mark. And then be careful to keep your blade on your mat. Even if you have a craft table and you don't care if it gets hurt, it dulls the blade if it's not on a self-healing mat. And then let me turn it again. Again, I'm lining it up with the lines on my mat. So I just kind of know that it's straight. And now I'm going to measure down 14 inches. Make sure you use the right side of your ruler. One time I almost used the top side from 14, and that's not 14 inches. So make sure you're measuring from 1 to 14. And again, I'm just making a little tick mark here on where the 14 is. It's not exactly 14 because I know I'm going to trim it down. I'm lining it up there, and then I also check over here and just make sure it looks straight. It's not exact yet, but we do want to make sure we don't have one side like 12 inches or something. And then I'm going to turn it one more time to cut the fourth side. So now it should be looking pretty square. I put it here on my mat. If you have some ink marks, don't worry about that, because remember you're going to sew these together, so some of that's going to disappear. So here's my 14-inch mark. Again, I'm getting it straight with that side, checking on this side, that looks pretty straight, and then I'm trimming that fourth side. And I mean, if you get it a little bit off, I think when the quilt is all sewn together, it's not going to matter that much, but you are trying to get your block semi-centered. Okay, I've got almost 12 of them cut. What I've decided to do is cut extras, just so that I can practice with one, and if I mess up any, I've got 12 good ones to use on the quilt. But what I'm keeping in mind is I'm making sure the image is centered in the 14 inches. Laying it out, I'm lining it up with images on here to make sure I've cut it straight. Next I'm going to be putting the fusible webbing on, so I'll show you that part next. Hey guys, I am now doing the fusible interface onto the t-shirts. So I have the t-shirt that's cut out. Mine were 14 inches by 14. So I've laid that down on an ironing mat. I've got the fusible webbing with the dots, the glue side to the fabric. This is the smooth side up. And then I've got a damp towel. And then I'm also using my Cricut Easy Press. The towel is a little bit wet. I've noticed the wetter the towel, the better, because that must really activate the glue on the fusing. And then I'm just taking the Easy Press over here and letting it sit on there for 10 to 15 seconds. I do notice with the damp towel that the temperature drops. So I'm letting it on there probably 10 to 20 seconds. The only way I know it's done is when I pick it up and make sure that this still isn't, you know, removable. It should all be sealed together there. And then I'm just moving it. I'm not scooting it. I'm picking up and shifting it to another part of the square. This Cricut Easy Press, I think, is the 9-inch one. So I'm having to move it section by section. And that's working well. So I did 3 of them with the first damp towel, and that came out well. And then this one I had to re-wet the towel. It was not sticking. I can pull it apart a little bit, but I can tell it's pretty glued together there. So I think the trick is the wet towel and then giving it time. Enough time and temperature. So you'll have to, you know, adjust according to the towel, how damp everything is, and then just letting that glue. I don't think you can burn it, but you really would just want to make sure you've got it glued together. And the water from the towel must be what activates that. Be careful with the steam. Of course, this is hot. So I'll keep it going, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, I'm back. I have ironed the fusing onto each of the backs. They're pretty stiff now. You can tell they're nice to work with. It's like a nice piece of fabric instead of just a flimsy t-shirt. So I've got them laid out on a table, and I've kind of got them by color, how I want them to look. And now what I'm trying to do is, I'm thinking I'm going to sew them each together. I'm going to show each row, and then I'll sew the rows together. So the middle of the quilt will be together. But then I'm thinking that I have enough of the red. I don't think I'm going to put a piece, a stripping, a sashing in the middle of each, but I do think I'm going to outline it in red. So I'm going to do a little, probably cut maybe 1.5 inches, and then with a 1/4 inch on each side of that, that would make it 1 inch wide. So just a little red line around the outside of the quilt, so that I'll have my quilt, but then when it comes to these colors, I didn't think it would stand out enough with this border. So I'm thinking that I'll have a little bit of a red next to it, so that all the pieces will be like this. They'll have a little bit of red, and then have this border, and then this red will get on the outside as the outside binding. So maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to see when I get them together. The other thing I'm going to have to figure out is they're 14 inches now, and then I'll sew them to each other, and then see what size they are, and then I'll have to measure how much, knowing that I want to have maybe a 5 to 6 inch border all around. I'll do the math to say, you know, 14 plus 14 plus 14 minus the when I sew them together, and you lose a little bit. So I'll do that math, and then I can have a border all along the outside. And then once that's together, I'll put the backing on, and put the batting in between this and the back piece. Let me show you that. My son was mostly into soccer, so this will be the back of the quilt. So I think it's gonna be really cute. So thanks. Okay, I have the t-shirts together, I have the border sewn on, and now I'm adding the binding. So I just wanted to explain that you make your binding. It's 2.5 inches pressed in half, and then you're putting right sides together, the raw seam at the end of the border seam here, and you're leaving a handful here. Leave 5 or 6 inches open, because you're going to sew this all the way around the edge, mitering on the corners, and then when you come back around to this part, you're going to finish the edge. You're going to pull this aside, sew the other end to this end, and then you can lay them down and finish stitching that last part. Okay, so let me get the binding sewn on. Okay, I think the hardest part of the binding is the corner. So I've been sewing, attaching the binding to the end of the border, and that's so that you get a finished edge. When you fold this back, that'll look like a finished edge. The hardest part is the corners. So I'm coming up on this corner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop before I get to the end. So I'm going to sew down to here, and then before I get to that end, I'm going to stop. I'm going to put my needle down, and then I'm going to pivot the fabric, because what you're doing is you're making this corner, but you want to make it come to a point in that corner. So I'm going to fold it back on itself. And it's a little bit hard because you're trying to do it under this foot here. I think you back up. It's been a while since I did it. I think you back up, get off the fabric, and now I'm going to fold. I always have to think about what it's going to look like in the finish. So you bring it over here and fold it with this completed edge. And then you bring it down here. So see, that's what it's going to look like when it's finished. I think I folded it wrong. I think I bring it up here. Bring it up here, and then fold it down like this, and then sew from here. So we're making the miter, and then we're folding it. You're just making that completed corner. Like I said, it's the hardest part of it, and it's just going to make it so that it's like that on the other side. Okay. Okay. So let's do that again. We didn't go to the edge. We backed up, and now we're pulled our fabric out so that we can fold this up. We're making a 9-degree edge there, and then we're folding this down. Okay. And then because we stopped, we are going to continue now at the 1/4 inch mark, and then I'll show you what that corner looks like. Get enough fabric out here so I can show you. Okay, so if I pull this corner out now, when we turn it right side out, see how that's going to look? Okay, so that's how that works, and this will be folded back, and then that's how you'll have a mitered corner when we sew this on the layer behind it. Okay. Okay, I'm coming up on the end of the binding here. So let me scoop my camera down. What I want to have happen here, I want to have these two pieces sewn together so that in the end this is all one big piece. So what I'm going to do is overlap this a little bit, and I'm going to cut this. So I've stopped sewing back here because I need some room to work here. So I'm leaving these open. I'm going to just cut this a little bit bigger than I need it. And then what I'm going to do is join these two. And I'm kind of laying them flat so that I know where this is going to meet up. And I can even put a pin in there to remind myself of where this is right here. So right about there. That'll lay flat when I sew it. So the reason I left room was I'm gonna bring this out here, cut this off, I needed that loose so that I could bring it out here and sew it, and I'm gonna sew right where the pin is to join these two pieces. So I'm gonna take my pin out, but I'm leaving my pin in to keep it in place. And right there's where I want to sew it. Okay. So I have that stitched together so that now, and you can give it a test run, see that it's all flat, and then I can start back up where I was sewing before. And I'm just keeping the quilt flat over here so that everything that's near the stitching area is nice and level with the sewing machine. And then I'm just going to sew this over. I'm going to finger press it. And you can see how that all became one big strip there. I'm lining it up with the edge of the border. Okay. So that's the end of the binding. That's all on there. And what I'll do now is I'll press this. Go to the ironing machine and press this. And then this part's going to get folded and sewn, hand sewn onto the back of the quilt. Okay, so that was a 2.5 inch strip, so it comes down to about 1/2 inch on both sides. And that's the back. Okay. Okay, so I have the binding on the edge, and now I'm figuring out the backing. So I bought 4 yards of the backing fabric, and what I just did was laid it, I folded the 4 yards in half, and I'm seeing that 2 yards covers the back of the quilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half and then sew it lengthwise so that it will cover the back of the entire quilt there. So I'm glad I got 4 yards. That was every bit of what I needed. And that's with the quilt being 66 inches long. So 4 yards was every bit needed. Like I said, this is folded in half. So I'm going to cut the edge and then just sew down the middle, and then that'll be the back of it. So then it's just a matter of sewing wrong sides together of the quilt and putting the batting in the middle. So that's what's up next. Okay, I wanted to show you the pinning part. I pinned from the other side. You can see the pins here. I pinned from the other side, but I'm going to stitch here and here on my sewing machine. So this is keeping the back fabric taut with the top of the quilt. But knowing that I'm going to stitch here and here, I'm going around and just pulling this back taut in between these other pins. It's flat on the table and you think it's going to stay flat, but you start carrying this over to your sewing machine and it will get very so I'm just pulling this taut and then putting a pin in here. I'm also being careful not to put the pins where I'm going to sew. So notice these are in here. I'm going to sew right here in this ditch, and then I'm being careful here because I'm going to sew here. And this is all just to keep the batting flat and the background fabric flat while I sew. Okay. Okay, I finished the binding on the side. I just did a stitch to, it's kind of a whip stitch on each side of it here. Finish the corners off, they're mitered. They look really good. So I think he's going to be really surprised. I think it turned out great. got 12 t-shirts on it. Bourbon bottles on the side, and then the back is soccer balls. So I think it turned out really cute. Thanks for watching, guys. On my blog, I've got all the instructions and supplies needed, and I'll put a picture of the final t-shirt quilt. Thanks, guys.